when Donald Trump was elected president a week and a half ago now. I felt this inspiration the next morning after watching his speech, proclaiming that he was king of the world. I felt the next morning right away, got to speak to this. Not because of any political reasons. I immediately called it Beyond Politics. That's the overall title of today, Beyond Politics. Basically preparing for the Trump years. Not because of politics. I gave up on politics a long time ago, like many other people did. Not that. But because it's an evolutionary moment. To be precise, it's a decisive turning point in evolution. In several directions at once, mutually contradictory and paradoxical. And that's the first statement I've made that the mind gets a little bit fuzzy around. It's not the last. I like to blow mind because mind doesn't understand. My mind doesn't understand, your mind doesn't understand. So you have to keep busting, blowing mind open. And in so many ways, it's like a multi-dimensional panorama is opening up before us. Let's call it an 8-sided geometrical figure. And every one of those dimensions shows a different picture. Not because any of them is wrong or right or more or less, but because all of them together form the soulscape of the next 4 years. So we're going to have to look at things from many different sides, and we're going to have to at times say things that don't fit together with things we've said before or next. Not because I'm not paying attention, but because there's so much going on that doesn't fit a linear, sequential, simple, dramatic, oh, now we've done it, we've elected a madman, and now the world's going to hell in a handbasket, or other versions you could come up with. I will say right away that if you have fear and dread and apprehension and anxiety, it is justified. It is perfectly justified. I won't talk you out of it. I won't try to make it all go away. We need that with us. We need that, the hunger and thirst that come with feeling like something's wrong. Even if it turns out that nothing's wrong in some ultimate sense, we need, on this plane of existence, the edge that it gives us to know that something's wrong. Again, I'm not saying something's ultimately wrong and it's all terrible, but there is something wrong here. It doesn't feel right. Something's strange. A lot is. What's great about it is that each one of us is internally free to make of this what we will. And that's the basis of what I'm sharing with you today. There is no generic collective mass reality, although the media portray it as such, in which we're all kind of being thrown into the same direction, and you just have to go with it because it's the program, and that's it. Each one of us will create the version of what happens that we are meant to create or co-create. And for example, one of the ways you can create it or co-create it is by living into what is really coming, not so much what's being put in the way of what's coming, but what's really coming. And in essence, you let yourself believe in, imagine, and conceive a different future, one that could never have happened unless Trump were elected. If Hillary Clinton were elected, which was an alternate reality with, 49% probability, I guess, at this point, it's a very strong possibility. It would be there's no way we would be gathering like this. There's no way 100,000 things that are about to happen would happen. Because, it would be reduced version of Barack Obama. I'm sorry about the feminine aspect, but I have to say that. It would be reduced version of Barack Obama. And that wouldn't particularly inspire much of anything except, here we go, let's, make of it whatever we will. Although I was supportive of Hillary Clinton at the end. But, you see, Trump is so much more than he is. I've worked intensively this week with his birth chart, which is, in public domain, it's well known, quite accessible, very interesting chart. And I have ways of working with these things now that are really strong. The co-publisher of some of my books, including an upcoming book, sent me a version of an upcoming book for next year called Star Sparks. And it takes every degree of the zodiac and gives it an extraordinarily intense reading. This book will be published next year, and I've been studying it this last week. It just came almost a week ago. And it's just completely changing my life. So I'm going to read you in about 10 minutes one of Donald Trump's degrees to try to set a certain tone. But I have some introductory things to say first before that will fit with the weave. The most important thing of all, I was trying to imagine, we're going to do teleclasses for the whole world, really, or certainly the US, we'll see if it's the whole world, very soon, starting in about 2 weeks. And I was trying to imagine, what would be put out in that form, because there you have to say some stuff, you can't just give a title. And the phrase that came to me was the gathering of the tribes, which is of course not a very original phrase, but that's what came to me. And I feel that that's what's happening, mainly, most of all, that there is and will be both a gathering of the tribes, because we've lost so much right now already. That we won't be able to sustain a situation of losing more. And if we can't lose more, that means we have to find each other and awaken together, because essentially we're all we have left is each other on this level of existence. I mean that in the sense that there are so many people who have kind of lost perspective in the last 4 to 8 years. I certainly would say the last 4 years. And in my estimation, there's a totally good reason for it, which is the world has taken a turn that's been so incredibly difficult and painful for so many people that people have been shutting down, and they've been kind of turning within and losing their sense of connection to anything wider, larger, and more current. A tremendous number of people have been doing that and losing perspective accordingly. And we need perspective again, because essentially, if we implode further into privatism, that's what everywhere I go, we'd be traveling all over America, the US, mainland, everybody everywhere is privatizing. They're incredibly introverted. They're extroverting in one way, but they're introverting in another way. And they're privatizing, they have their own little world, and their own little computer, and their own little personal world. And they don't even do much of anything except kind of try to protect, preserve, and maintain that. By the way, I'm not putting this down or trying to make this wrong. It's just almost inevitable, given the times. But that's the cycle we were in. leading up to this point. And it is not the cycle we can sustain any further. So let's just call it the cycle of 2012 to 2016, the privatizing of the USA. Everybody's got their own, and nobody's got much of anything going in the wider current. During the next 4 years, it's not going to go more that way. We are about to reverse that trend completely. We have to. The only thing that will stand against the fascistic side or the black magical side or the destructive side of the whole juggernaut of Mr. Trump is humanity rising up and saying, not so much, we hate you, get out of there, we don't want you to be president, but rather, we are the voice of the future, and we want you to listen to us and pay attention, because you are a future spark soul who has gotten snagged in the past. That's the key to his chart, his birth chart. He's a visionary soul who's gotten sort of snagged in the past. And so he needs those who are not snagged in the past to kind of create an atmosphere, a feeling tone, a vibrational opening, so that he can kind of stir from his slumber and his trance and his all of it, and he can realize that there actually is an alternative that feels real and true for him. And I actually think we can get through to him. One of the reasons we can get through to him is, as I'll talk about in just a minute, there are aspects of his chart that are just amazing, and they're not far out ahead of him. They're just one step away. I knew a man born same day, different year as Trump. He was a leader in a cult commune I was in 1969 in New York City. He was completely from the New York area like Trump. He had 7,000 different things in common with him. I survived 6 months with this man. I was the only survivor. Everybody else went down. He was a very, very destructive force. But I found out how I could get through it. If I could get through that, I know how to get through Trump. There are ways to get through to people who actually wish it were different, but have gotten persuaded that it's not going to be the way they've dreamed and hoped. And so they're going to go for the second best, which is what their karma dictates, what their past calls them to repeat. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to read you actually 2 degrees from Trump's chart and the descriptions in Star Sparks. The degree in his chart that speaks the most about his public impact is his moon. In astrology, it's always the moon. That's your public channel, you could say. And here's more people. And so I'm just going to get this out and read it after they
come. Yeah, open the door, please. Thanks.
What sign is moon?
This is moon in 22 degrees Sagittarius. Full moon, born in a very eclipsed full moon.
Yeah, that's me. Denise, are you okay over there? I'm good. Susan, there's some here too, if you guys want another chair.
This man, Mr. Trump, is profoundly the example of a full moon birth. He is what a full moon birth is all about. And in a full moon birth, the sun and the moon are directly opposite each other, as his are, and they live in different worlds. The task of the soul is to reconcile them. But if as in his case, the sun is in Gemini and the moon is in Sagittarius. The sun in Gemini is already 4 or 6 or 8 worlds on its own. The moon in Sagittarius is 4 or 6 or 8 worlds on its own. They're the two most multiple influences you could have. So it's like trying to reconcile somewhere between 5 and 20 worlds. Or because of the image here, I'll say 5 and 20 worlds is exactly what it is, because the image for his moon degree is blackbirds flying out of a pie. You remember the context of that? No?
No.
Not everybody does.
Book.
What's the context of it?
Can't remember the first line, but it's 4 and 20.
Oh, wait, 4 and 20, I found it.
Very baked in a pie. When the pie was open, the birds began to sing.
Wasn't that a crazy something?
Dainty dish, yeah.
It's pretty
Except
good,
before
okay.
the king.
It's the world of what, Mother Goose, or? Yeah. Okay, blackbirds flying out of a pie. The underworld comes upon us all at once. Suddenly we find ourselves under a barrage of shadow influences and energies. And then we can enact, can return to, can feel entirely what we would otherwise miss. We are given this chance to connect with the dark, to undergo a kind of counter-initiation. It has great possibilities embedded in it, but to get there requires a hard and long series of struggles with our own shadow, and vaster shadows as well. It takes courage, resiliency, and foolhardy willingness to enter these frequencies yet again in order to find where they lead. The best of it is that we have inside an edge, a sharp witnessing subconscious mind, which gets what is happening and knows what it's all about. If we can stay in tune with this subtle layer, the whole journey becomes more fascinating and compelling than dreadful and repetitively destructive. The worst of it is that the undertow has a bite, an addictive tug, which is very hard to refuse. Before we even realize anything, we have dropped our vibrational level several notches and become susceptible to every kind of negativity and habitual weakness. And it seems like we never learn. We just do it all over again the next time. Our own dark suspicions in this direction will ultimately prove to be a self-cursing that is no longer necessary, not accurate, not useful in any way. For we can come to the center of this maze, where we will see that the old karmic pattern has that kind of snap to it, but we are not our karmas. We are the one underneath who could overthrow every ounce of it if we honor every part of what we go through and stay with ourselves without flinching.
Without what, Elias?
Without flinching.
Flinching. Thank you.
I live with 4 children. The oldest and the youngest both have this degree prominent in their charts. And they both manifest it very negatively. It is the secret of what's negative in both of them. And they clash with each other 24/7 on this ground. So I live this world. It is not sort of slightly. The blackbirds flying out of the pie don't hover at the edge of doing so and say, would you like us to come out, or is it time now? Blackbirds flying out of a pie, when they come, they come. It's an elemental event. What causes them to come? Emotional backlog triggered by a given situation, happening constantly. So Donald Trump lives in a seethingly, personally painful, difficult world. His full moon is imploded. This, of course, is not all of him, but this is his moon. How can that go anywhere? Well, the total reality of it, taking everything about his moon, is that he has to play it out to the max for it to go anywhere. Like these two children of mine, if we tell them no, don't do that, that we could be talking in a vacuum to ourselves in the great, great vast distance somewhere, and it wouldn't register any better than us telling. There's no way to stop it. You cannot even slow it down. So if Trump tries to be good, he can have cycles where he can sort of suppress his moon like he is right now. He's trying to be good, he's trying to be good. But that moon will erupt when crisis hits, when things go against it. As everybody says, like 16 different people are saying that I encounter in all directions. They're saying, well, it's great for Trump to act this way right now, but watch what happens when things go against him. Yeah, it's the obvious thing, right? But he's not to blame. He's just doing what he does. That is, that's not a fake version you're seeing. That's actually Donald Trump. The main reason he won is that the gutsy people of the world knew that he was really himself and Hillary wasn't. Mm-hmm. And that counted more than whether he was for the wall around toward Mexico or not. Really, just that. Yeah. Which is not something you can say, well, that's stupid, that's ignorant, that's, no, it's not. It's sensible. It's realistic. He's who he is. Now, that doesn't make everything perfect, but it's an interesting thing to start with. It's a really important thing to start with. And I would say...
It's kind of refreshing.
Yes. And I would say, if you look back to presidents that we've had for a long period of time, you would be hard put to find anybody who was as closely real to their own nature as he is. Mm-hmm. I don't even know who that would be. Maybe in a certain way, Harry Truman, from my early childhood, was a little like that, but he was also a super politician, but a little bit of that. But he's just incredible, in that way. Just let's dramatize this for 5 seconds here. In a time period when everybody who comes to... Bernie Sanders is not a political candidate, he's a phenomenon. Let's put him to the side. I'm talking about political candidates, which is what Trump came on as. It's an atmosphere, the political atmosphere, where if you have a little bit of something extra special that's really yours, such as Barack Obama did in 2008, it's a very endangered species because the system is so corrupt, right? But what if you have a huge dose, like a mega dose, of being who you are? They're not going to be able to take it away from you. No force is going to be able to take away from him his candor, vulnerability of a kind, authenticity. Now again, I'm not making everything he does terrific, but this is a crucial factor to understand. Because what it does do is it sets the tone for all of us to get with who we are authentically. Because if our president is doing that against the grain of all that presidents ever do, which is bullshit around and create absolute nonsense in the name of public relations and being popular and successful, Bush being the perfect example of that, the second Bush, the young Bush that preceded Barack Obama. You have here the phenomenon of real life breaking loose. That's what's happening at that level, and it's what's going to happen at our level. We need and must have real life breaking loose, because this kind of uptight, stiff, role-playing, formal, fixated, and non-livable mode of consciousness has basically shown itself to be bad for the planet, bad for the human soul, bad for everybody. So that's the genuine part. And I really want us to not relativize that at this moment with anything else. Not to say, oh, but there's no oh, but about that. That's clean, clear, crisp. We've got to sit with that. So I'm going to say one outrageous thing about it, to push it a little further. Since I have a Sag moon myself, and I've been surrounded by a lot of Sag moon people in my life, I want to even push this far. If he plays that out to the hilt, as he will have to do as long as he's president, until someone shoots him or he loses an election or whatever it's going to be, he's going to greatly catalyze an enlivening dimension in multiple levels. He's going to be like a kind of spark generating vitality, enthusiasm, and dynamic energy. Now, I told you earlier that I was going to contradict myself massively in this occasion. We're going to go into a different part of Trump's chart in just a minute, and first I have to introduce it and bridge toward it. Everything I've just said is true. It's real. It isn't canceled out by anything else. But what's running Trump is a stronger planet in his chart, which is Saturn in Cancer. And Saturn in Cancer at its most reactionary extreme. And the bizarre situation here is that this life of the party person, as I've just described him, in essence, the party being life being celebrated, also happens to be immensely caught in the past in a way that's extremely difficult. And because of that, a lot of what he's going to generate is going to contradict, go against, and make very difficult the very thing that he is all about. Now that's not that unusual. In general, that's what happens. Basically what we have is, we want things to go one way, but another part of us won't let them go that way. This is karma. And we basically can't quite become awake and masterful and clear with the part that does that. And so we sort of subvert our own reality all the time. So I'm going to read you the Saturn degree, really the key influence in Trump's birth chart. Saturn
What's
degree.
the degree?
This is Cancer 24, a single crumbling Corinthian column. A single crumbling Corinthian column. Corinthian column, just so you know, being a symbol of ancient Greece. Ancient Greece, okay? That's the context here. Ancient times prepare for future times and bypass modern ego development. We once were pre-selves, free to roam in the cosmos at will. We are now becoming post-selves, taking up our incarnation in a spaciousness that draws us to the same places we once knew, but with a very big difference. Way back when, our strings were pulled by invisible forces. We tapped the mysteries because there was no other way. It was natural and inevitable to place our unconscious selves upon the altar of the greater macrocosm. We were the whole of existence in one, as ever, just as intended. In the near future reawakening of cosmic spirit in this earth, we become so grateful and relieved that the ancient place we've always held to can be our springboard to what comes next. If we can undergo this one initiatory passage of the utmost intensity and urgency, we must shatter the idols, the images, the last remnants, the form aspect of what once was, in order to find legitimately, in a grounded way, what can be and must be now. But we have held so tightly, so tenaciously to these last dregs that the willingness to let go of them to make way for the new is elusive and out of reach until we come up against the ravages of belief systems, old karmic groupings, and specialized antique allegiances. It is vital for us to surrender to the inescapable fact that what we once held so very sacred is simultaneously our obstacle and our further goal. What we once held so very sacred is simultaneously our obstacle and our further goal. The obstacle is the attachment to the form dimension, which is subtle, deep under, difficult to own. The goal is to reclaim the spark of the ancient timeless ways once we have stripped ourselves of their glamour. In my translation of that, this tree that's in my chart and one of my children's charts, and again, I live with this degree all the time. That's far more difficult than it sounds. It's really, really difficult. Because if you subliminally sense that ancient forms that you're familiar with from other times and places, very familiar with, are the only thing left of something that was incredibly vital, then you have this compulsion to try to recreate it and perpetuate it and make sure it isn't trashed, it doesn't go away. The problem, of course, being that most of what you will try to perpetuate as an old form is already out its way out. It is decadent, it is not useful, it's causing a lot of problems already, and as you espouse it and advocate it and go further with it, you're going to be beating a dead horse for the sake of something that you remember, that you believe and assume is the one thing people need now in order to return to something of value and worth from long ago and far away. And so what's happening with Donald Trump is that he is a herald of ancient pasts, particularly what's happened when very great civilizations have gone down. He's been there. He's been involved. And he is nominated to help this one to go down by trying to make the old work in a very tyrannical, rigid fashion, and in the process exposing the fact that it is pathetically inadequate and that it can't hold the way he wants it to and needs it to. But it has to play out. It's easy for me to tell you this from his chart, but life isn't a matter of, I can't just go and give him a reading and tell him this is, oh, right, you're right, good. We'll just forget. No, it doesn't work that way. He has to play this out. This is his nominated role. We appoint him for this. And it's not wrong. It's not bad. It may be somewhat retrogressive, but sometimes you have to go backward to go forward. Sometimes if you're going backward in a kind of half-assed way, you better go backward with intent and purpose and skill so that you can go forward with some kind of thrust and momentum. It's like that. So I would imagine that Donald Trump is the man of the hour, the perfect man to be our villain and our hero in one. He's not one or the other. And he's an excellent villain and a genuine hero. There aren't very many heroes these days. He's a hero. He's just a very flawed hero. He's great. He's a great man. And so we have carved out the space for ourselves. The only way we would get it, because the most obstructive element in the United States in recent years is that everything is blurring to a point where nobody knows what's real or true anymore. It's all become what some people call disinformation. It's all become kind of propaganda. Who knows any longer who's telling the truth or what's real or what it means or where it's going or where it's coming from or why it's out there? Nobody even knows. It's all kind of smoke and mirrors. So, given that, let's go with the real smoke and mirrors. Let's really take it to the ultimate point. So we need a clarifying moment. We have a clarifying moment. It's a clarifying moment of the extended kind. And we will all suffer greatly in this clarifying moment. And it may well bring us where we need to go. But it isn't going to be to our liking. It won't be to my liking, and it won't be to your liking. It's not going to happen the way we would prefer. Partly because one of the ways that those who are very hooked into ancient ways of life from way back tend to operate is to kind of try to get rid of a whole bunch of stuff that seems to them to be inflated, pretentious, and unreal. And a whole lot of stuff seems to Mr. New York City to be inflated, pretentious, and unreal. And about 90% of what I know as reality is on that list. There's only about 10% of my reality that would not seem to him to be inflated, pretentious, and unreal. Because it's expanded beyond that tight little framework that he's coming from. And so his tendency is going to be, I'll be a gnat in his, he wants to, get me out of the way. But not just me, you, all of us. Not in the sense that I really believe that he just wants to be the next Hitler. It's not exactly that. He's too smart for that. It's that he just wants the real people to have their real world back. And we are individual people. We don't have that salty, earthy quality in that way that he's hooked on as a form, semblance, imagery. There may be more earthiness and more in touch with reality qualities going on amongst us than many of the people that he thinks are more in touch with reality. But that's neither here nor there. We're not concerned with that right now. I'm not saying that he's got his values on straight, he knows what he's talking, but that's what's happening. Okay, but if we become closer to the earth, deeper in our hearts, more in touch with our reality, more present to the situation, we can, in essence, defeat that projection. That's the subtle, refined point I want to make. And in fact, in about 10 minutes, I would like us all to go into something about that together, because I have a vision of that. I would say would be the best way to put it. I have a vision of that. Like what would be the way to tap the evolutionary potential of the situation that's now at hand and will be at hand in the next years, presumably. And a big part of it is for us to come out of the clouds and to come into the earth in a way where our love for this earth speaks volumes. That's the force that's missing from the whole Trump world. When I grew up in New York City, and I was very, very much a New York City person, in that cult commune that I was in at 22, we were in New York City, and one of the members of the group called me out at one moment. We were walking on the streets of New York City, of Manhattan, and he called me out and he said, "I've been watching you. You don't even see anything but people here, do you? You don't even see these trees. You don't see anything." He didn't come from the city, he came from outside the city. And it was true. I had to work it out for years. I was growing up in New York City. All I knew really was people and kind of gritty realities. The refinements, the subtleties were beyond me. I wasn't even drawn to them. I just wanted to get there for people and have people change. That was my trip. And Donald Trump comes from that kind of world where there is no nature. If you wonder why he's so ecologically abysmally ignorant, it's because there is no nature in his world, to speak of.
We've got to get him on outward bound, I wrote that. He needs to go on outward bound.
Yes, yes. There's no mother nature. Let's use that expression, I think it's a good one. There's no mother nature in his reality. But to the most incredible extent, I'm sure some of you are enough familiar with cities, especially cities like New York, to know what I'm talking about. There's this thing about it where you go to the park and you sort of enjoy how pretty the trees are or something, right? It's always this thing of how pretty the trees are. But you see, they're not alive. You are what's happening. Every person is it. And there's nothing around you really, including other people. They're not, because you got to drive to make sure you survive. And you got to make it. And you got to make it on your terms. And if you're rich and you're famous and you're great, you got to really do that up. So we've got to create a life realm that is sufficiently occupied, indwelled, embodied, fleshed out, that it won't give way to this kind of ignorance and tune-out of the planet. But again, I want to say one more time, that New York City syndrome, it's no accident that New York City is the great mythologized city in our times, and that people think of it as being, this fantastic place, because New York is the generator of the sensibility of our times. LA is the generator of everything fake. And so if you want to get everything fake, you go to LA. But if you want to get the real stuff, you go to New York, because that's the, kind of the grunge capital of the world. And so it's not just Trump and New York City. This is what we've been generating collectively, is this world where we don't really care any longer. We give lip service to, white folks anyway, we give lip service to our involvement with the earth and stuff. Here, I'll make one reference to something. I was in Bookworm a couple hours ago, the used bookstore in town called Bookworm, one of my favorite stores, and I came upon a book of poetry by a Hawaiian woman, a very native Hawaiian woman, and I spent 11 years in Hawaii until a year and a half ago, and or less. And this was the most angry book of poetry from anybody I've ever seen. And the entire focus of her book was to convey how it really is for women of Hawaii to live in the world that they've had imposed upon them by white men. And it was just, oh God, it was so intense, just even looking into it for 10 minutes. Almost made me late for this gathering. And we have got to realize that we've created Trump, and that he's our mirror. Geminis are always about mirrors. He's our mirror. And the mirror is saying, you've been in an excarnational fever. You've been using your fingers to keep this whole little world going, this techno world, and you've lost touch with everything else. And I know what I'm talking about. You could go into detail, but let's leave it at that. Last thing, and then I'd like to have some conversation. Just as a dramatic culmination to this, but not a shift, just a dramatic culmination. My personal experience is that we are dangerously close to a really far edge. That really far edge is where a combination of forces will take this planet away from us. They will do so for one reason. They believe we are not taking care of it. They believe we are not here. They believe that we have lost it. We're going to have to prove, now this is intentionally dramatic, this part. We're going to have to prove that that's not accurate, or that if it was, that it becomes less accurate. We're going to have to prove to ourselves and each other and the earth that this is our planet, and we do not intend to give it over to forces that have no heart feeling and gut feeling for what this is, and its beauty and its wonder and its magic, and that's what this is about. I'm sorry to have to be so impassioned about it, but that's how I really feel. We can't go on like this.
No.
So I want to open this up to a shared context now. That's my provocative opening.
So I was reminded I was living in Johannesburg, South Africa at the end of apartheid, and I found, I initially worked for a really posh British-run art gallery. It was run by an ex-boxer he was a very strong conservationist, and it's just a curious kind of situation to find yourself in. And I just finished writing a thesis at Smith College on fascism, and really wanted to put myself in a situation. I wanted to walk my talk. I wanted to really feel into it rather than just think through my thesis, and really not fake it through anything, So I plunged right into something I knew not what I was entering into. So I was in that art gallery for a while, and I put together an international wildlife exhibition and met the head of just a group of wildlife conservationists, and I ended up working with them in the Okavango swamps then. But in the meantime, I was with a lot of Europeans and British, South Africans who were liberals in the country, very much for the change, putting a lot of money into getting their domestic help houses in Soweto, and I go visit and stay in Soweto, and I checked it all out. But then as I traveled, when I left the one job before I started working in the bush, I met a lot of Afrikaners. And if you don't know who they are, they're the French Huguenots that moved down to South Africa, and are more like the very right-wing conservatives of this country, pretty radically right-wing, that were holding up apartheid at that time. And when you spoke of Trump and the freshness and that he wasn't afraid to be himself and stand in his truth, I found over time, speaking with the Afrikaners, I get that. They weren't afraid to blatantly say, I don't think the Africans are as intelligent. I don't think they work the same way. I don't think their brains work the same way. I've seen them in the field. This is the way they are. And at first you're kind of horrified, someone's really speaking to you like that. It's like, certainly at 21 I was just like, whoa. These are like living Nazis. I get to see them in the flesh. And I thought, wow. But there was something refreshing about it. Like with my British friends, they were like coated over by the liberalism, by the do-gooding of their place and their lovely lifestyle. And, even though they're living this way, nothing's really touching or changing them because they're holding the status quo in a way. So there's something similar going on right now in that way of wanting to, flip the hubris, dig it up and flip it out of the country. And so when you were speaking it just all flooded back into my mind. As frightening as it was, staring into these people's faces and hearing what they had to say, I could trust it a little more. I could trust that they really would do what they were going to say, whereas the rest was nebulous and amorphous, and there wasn't follow-through.
Yeah. The one thing I will say, ultimately, for Donald Trump, beyond what I said before, is that he will be willing to learn from experience. The difficulty with that British group you were just talking about is that they weren't paying attention enough to learn from experience. They were just covering it over with their ideology and their trip. Whereas he has shown throughout his life that he's willing to learn from experience. And so the one projection we don't want to make on him and the whole thing is that it's just a blanket assertion of a certain way of life that is detrimental and that it will just be imposed rigidly, arbitrarily, and that's that. That whole idea is sheer paranoia. He's going to learn from experience. I bet those people that you're dealing with who are being more real learned a lot from what happened next after.
Right, sure.
You know, because they would have to be shaken up and turned inside out because it didn't turn out to be the kind of world they thought.
They left.
They left. Oh, wow. They had to leave.
Well, a lot of the liberals left. They had to leave South Africa.
Yeah, I guess so. I still think they must have learned more than people who weren't paying attention.
Sure.
Basically, I'm saying Trump is paying attention. He listens to things. He's got his ear to the pulse. But the subtler points you're making, I'm not trying to override them, are important because we are definitely at a point where our hypocrisies and our ways to keep things at arm's length, our Britishisms, are going to go down fast. Yeah.
Well, Ellias, I was just going to say, I just appreciate so much because, you know, what I was feeling all along with Hillary is that she was in constant attack of Trump and not being her, you know, I don't know, personally I just wasn't getting a feel for months and months and months about anything about Hillary, her authenticity, her heart, her vulnerability, and I just was seeing them both as two little kids where Trump's wound of narcissism was just in full blown and hers being told by her grandmother and her mother, get out and just be tough, you know, just get out. And so I just kept seeing them as these little tiny kids somewhere between the ages of 0 and 5 in their complexes. And, you know, and I agree with you so much, Trump seemed much more genuine. And the other thing I just want to say is my hope is that all of us, knowing what you just shared about the earth, will rally no matter what. And I read, you know, it's become impossible to read the news anymore in the New York Times, which used to be fun. But John Kerry, I don't know if any of you saw that, you know, he's completely committed to the work that he's been doing around climate change. And I just am envisioning all of us who care about the planet coming together and supporting the earth. You know, we really need to, like you're saying, that's all we've got. So thank you so much, Elias. You're really bringing present, future, which you always do for decades, to us.
Yes.
I think from my own personal experience living very off the grid with a lot of very right-wing people after growing up in a European, very liberal household. My father's from Ireland. We can't do this up here.
Yeah.
We have to start feeling our way through this. We're so used to thinking our way through things, but we really have to feel the earth. We have to develop a relationship with the earth. Not just on a conceptual level, let's recycle, let's do this, let's do that. That's all really important, and we have to continue with that. But there's something missing, there's a ground missing that needs to be established. And I'm not saying I know how to do that, but I think that's really key.
Well,
We each have to do it.
I will say that I do know how to do that, and I am doing that, and I'm going to speak from experience. Everything I'm recommending to you is part of my daily reality, and this in particular I want to speak to from me. During my 11 years in Hawaii, the main reason I was there, in retrospect, was that I needed Pele to kick my ass, and I lived in the Big Island for like 5 years, and I needed all the grace goddesses of Hawaii to introduce me to what it's like when the divine feminine is right inside of nature every moment, every day. And that was the 5 years or so that I lived in Kauai. And when I returned to the mainland in July of 2015, I was put into shock for about a year. I didn't even realize I was in shock. Usually when you're in shock, you don't know you're in shock. That's one of the odd things about shock. It seems like life. There's a lot of people in shock these days, but it seems like life. The shock was that everything I had learned in Hawaii, everything was gone, missing, not reflected, not happening anywhere I went, anywhere, at all. So I've been realizing in the last few months, especially since coming to Colorado 3 months ago, that I'm going to have to bring that somehow back with me, which is not easy to do. It's not easy to do at all. I've known a number of Hawaiians who, when they moved to the mainland, lost almost everything they had, and they have a lot more of it than I do because they come from this completely. It's very hard to translate, very hard to transmit. But what happens in that, and it doesn't have to be the Hawaiian mode, it's just that it's deeply feminine, and it's something we need. It's not the only mode for this. But to speak into what you were just talking about, okay, what I learned was that, this is harder in a masculine body, but I did learn it, was that my body was yearning for and longing for a connection with the earth, which was the only thing that could satisfy me. And that while when I first got there, I didn't know how to do much about that, I had to learn. And for me, it's never the outer thing. So it wasn't just a matter of, well, you just go to the ocean, immerse in the ocean, I did some of that for sure, a lot. But that wasn't quite what I'm referring to. I don't mean physical exercise. For some reason, everybody always translates everything as physical exercise. My Sag Moon can do that too, I know that one. What I had to do was to sink into it, to really sink into it, especially at certain spots, at certain times. And how I got it was, it all happened, the two youngest of my children were born on the same beach in Kauai, conceived in Big Island, born in Kauai. And the first one, because of the time of year, June 24th, was born in the ocean. Second one, end of October, born on the sand near the ocean. No way, we're going in that cold water at the end of October. But in June, it was perfect. So Kalki was born in the ocean, without a midwife, without a doctor. And the woman who was the doula had talked on the phone the previous night with a midwife, and she described, what do you do if the cord's wrapped around the neck? So the cord was wrapped around the neck, seriously. So she came, she took the cord out from around the neck as skillfully as anybody, and there was no problem. But this was, we're alone, the ocean, no doctor, no midwife. But we knew it was okay, and it was okay. But what happened in that birth was that was one part of it. I experienced that Kalki was born out of the ocean. I mean, not just that he was outwardly born out of the ocean, that he was actually born out of the ocean, that his entire being was born out of the ocean, and that so were we. And the two older boys were there, and that now I knew what she meant, what the various deities, the feminine deities of Hawaii meant. They were always whispering things to me, they were showing me things. That it was a total thing. It wasn't, I hope I can convey this to you, it was a total thing, it wasn't a partial thing. That's the only way that he could be born because we weren't ready for stuff like, cords wrapped around the neck and all this stuff. we had to rely on graces. To rely on graces, you have to be totally there in it. If you're not totally there in it, graces don't come. But if you're totally there in it, the graces are in resonant accord with you, and you find that incredible things start to happen. That's what being close to the earth on a feeling level means.
So I'll share my story. After the floods of 2013, I lived in Lyons. For a year, I had what I call a spontaneous awakening, and I didn't even know what was going on when it happened, but that's where it was. And I would sit on my deck, and I was just so filled with love. I was bursting with love, and I would sit on my deck and watch this energy flow down the mountains, and that energy was love.
Yes.
It came in me, out of me, and it just kept going around. And it was so beautiful, and it all came from my heart. And this I very much understand about the brain thing. Mind gets in the way. It gets in the way because everything came out of my heart. And it was love, laughter, wisdom. You know, it was so weird. Wisdom was weird. But anyway, so that was my 2013, 14. And so the importance of that is that, number one, I do know that we are all connected to this planet. We are part of it. This body thing is, I think, is kind of an illusion. And so I do believe that we are part of this earth, and we have to fight for this earth. You know, and so when the elections happened, I found out the results, and I felt enormous anger. It was so big. I actually hit my computer. I hit my boyfriend, which I never do, and profound shame for this country, that we voted for him. And I'm very conscious of how I spend my energy. I only have limited energy, and I try and spend it well and positively so that I can go to the end of the day and say, I've left this place a better world every day. And I know that anger and shame are not healthy. So it took me a couple of days to really work on that anger. And I can say I passed the anger now because I don't think it's helpful. And the shame, I realized that when I joined a group in Lyons a couple of days ago, an conscious action group, the way for me to work with my shame is that I refuse to be complacent anymore. You know, we got here because of complacency, and it has moved me for the first time in my 52 years to take absolute action with absolute certainty that I have to do it, to draw other people in, to get together, because we are so much bigger than Trump. And then I was trying to think of the blessing, because I was trying to think of the blessings. It took a long time to work with the blessing for Trump, but I did come up with one this quickly. And it has to do with what you're talking about, is that I think Trump epitomizes all the darkness that we have. We all have a piece, a part of Trump, you know, and what this is about is for us to have personal growth. And this is the way I'm looking at it, is that this is the biggest challenge I've had for personal growth in my life. And Trump is going, you know, if we allow ourselves to take this momentum and go with it, we individually will grow, and this country will be, and I thank Trump for that, because it took someone as big as Trump to motivate me, you know, and so I thank him for that.
Thank you.
Yeah, we're starting to get into a good pulsing rhythm of revelation and disclosure. And I want to bring one further thing and then go further with the group process. By far, the one experience in my life that has shaped me to be who I am is death.
Yeah.
And I want to describe something to you that I've never talked about before at this level, but it's super relevant to this now. Oh boy. I was with my twin for 10 years after knowing her very well for 5 years, and being with somebody else. And she was with somebody else, and then we got together for 10 years. At the end of that 10 years, she was dying of cancer. And she, like many people, now this is bare naked stuff, like many people dying of cancer, she could not face some of what was happening to her. She was facing, I would say, about 60% of it. And that was just incredibly intense, totally intense. I had to face the other 40%. And I had to not talk to her about it and not do anything with it with her, because if I brought any of it to her, which I tried to do, she was just furious with me, because that was shadow material she wasn't ready and she wasn't going to face. She was going to die without facing it. This is really, just stay with me. And I was so connected to her. We were such twins, despite having a lot of conflicts and so on, that it was given to me spiritually to do that work for her when she was dying. Nobody knew I was doing it. Nobody. I didn't talk about it with anybody. I didn't share it with anybody. I didn't even fully know it myself. I wouldn't trust my own mind to know that. But in fact, I was carving out a space so that she could die into her real death. This sounds really fantastic, I realize. What she was doing is she was working on her personal stuff, which is what she needed to do, to the point where, shortly before she died, she manifested as a free, joyous, spontaneous, infinitely loving, incredibly life-generative being. That's who she really was, and that's how she was in her final years. And everybody, 50 people got in on it, 100 people got in on it. So she did that personal part. I was an underworld figure, even to myself, and I was digging all this stuff out. Now, when she died, the moment she died, I was there. And this is my experience when she died. Because of that, a being of great light came and took her, and she went. And I went with her, but I went with her as a representative of the earth. That's the work I was doing, to unite her impulse with the earth. And her last words to me before she died was, "Don't let me lose the earth." And so on some level she knew what I was doing. Don't let me, that was directed to me very intensely. I wouldn't let her lose the earth. So when she died into the heavens, I brought the earth with us so that 13 days later she could come back with me into the earth and we could mediate between the earth and the heavens together. And that's what we've been doing ever since. And because of that experience, I know that the earth reclaiming that we must do is only half or so about the earth. I hope this will come across the way I mean it. The other half is what she was doing. I can explain this. Our spirits have to rise up to our most expanded place, which is not something that's a given at all. That's how we claim heaven. If we do that and we dig sufficiently deep into the earth, we will bring our spirits incarnating into the earth, and we will do the earth work at the level it really needs to be done. This is an incarnational drama. I hope you understand what I'm saying. That is to say, it's not actually about the earth per se. It's about us. We are the earth and we are the heavens. And we have to find the earth in us and find the heavens in us and bring them together to fulfill this phase in evolution. And I know that could sound incredibly demanding, but it's actually natural, inevitable, and our next step. That's where this is going. It's not one or the other. You have to go down to go up. You have to go in to go out. You have to do the masculine to do the feminine. You have to become at one with all of it to find your way into the part of it that you're most called to. We can't leave anything out any longer. Some of us don't want anything to do with heaven. We have a vendetta against it. You know, God let us down, or religion let us down, or something. You can't do without it. If Sarah hadn't absolutely expanded into the cosmos, nothing I was doing would have meant anything. But if I hadn't dug us a deep enough carved out space, she couldn't have returned. She couldn't have been part of this as she is. We need the worlds to connect. We need all the worlds to join. When people talk about, you know, polarities and things getting too polarized, that's the level that I want to deal with. I realize that this is a very cosmic, intense level, but that's what I'm dealing with, and I have to be honest with you. That's what I can offer. That's what I know about. That's what I'm here for. And I'm very surprised I'm talking about this.
And we're very honored. And we're very honored.
And just so you know, Elias's book right there, Elias, can you grab it? That book of Theana is an incredible book about the relationship of Elias and Sarah. It's just mind-blowing.
It's so funny, because last week someone recommended it to me.
Whew.
Really?
Yeah.
Mind-blowing about his relationship. And for those of us who are, you know, just like Elias is saying, being open to all the world and to the relationship with the wisdom from death, it totally normalizes it, and it just heightens how we can live what Elias is saying. Thank you, Elias.
The only reason that this book has sold very few copies is that it confronts shadow all throughout the book.
Yeah.
And most people do not want that to happen. They can't stomach it, they can't deal with it. If you are deep enough into these realms, it's a total revelation. Every word is a revelation, as many people have told me the book is, certainly is to me. But this book also, that we're going to put out next year, the Star Spark, I hadn't seen the book in almost a year and a half until this week. You know, I didn't really remember what it's like. And it's like incredibly deep into shadows. It's always confronting deep stuff. And I realized, wait a minute, I've been involved with these books. How did this happen? Obviously, I'm missing something. I seem to have an extremely strong bias to probe into shadows and bring them into the light. And I guess I'm stuck with it. I guess I cannot get out of it.
So can I ask a question on that topic about, you know, really the exposing the shadow and sitting in the shadow? And
Yes.
I'm just curious about our relationship with individuals who represent the shadow, like Trump. There's many people that I have ignored or not paid attention to who don't have my beliefs. I think many of us are having that revelation now.
Yes.
You know, having been a political activist, a climate activist, blah, 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 you know, I haven't listened to the other side very well. So I just want to ask about that in the context of this bigger picture, heaven and earth, shadow and not shadow, whatever, you know, it's all, I mean, you know, that was my definition. But really allowing, like, to sit in the pimple explosion of what I would see the other side and have an open mind. have a mind that can hear, have a mind that can, or an open heart too. And I just want to ask about any guidance on that, because I think that to me is feeling like a lesson in this. How to listen, how to ask, how do I hold this other side?
There's a state of being which just since Trump's election, I've been realizing is what I'm really, really most about of anything. The term, I'm guided constantly, I write lots of stuff. And the term that was used for this in my inner world was open awareness. And I want to describe to you, that could mean anything, but I want to describe to you what that means. Open awareness has kind of two levels to it. Kind of the overt and the covert, like everything else. I start with the overt, the simple, basic part. The one thing I would recommend the most to meet these times is to be in this space where you make sure that what comes your way receives in you a full hearing and a full listening. Today Neptune is going direct, and there's an aspect to it from another planet, and so I'll put this in very Neptunian terms. You make sure that you listen, that you hear, that you create a kind of an open channel, an open vessel in yourself, so that when things come to you that you don't expect or that you don't like or that don't seem to be easy to handle or move with, that instead of reacting to it or being neutral toward it, you actually become engaged in great interest and enthusiasm about it. Because you know something's going to arise for you that will teach you and evolve you and grow you in that situation. However, the underside of it, which I have to be honest about because it came up already as soon as I got into this, is that there's something incredibly painful about that state. Inevitable pain, necessary pain, but pain. The pain is we've been missing so much for so long that when we start to allow experience to reveal itself to us, there's somebody in us that's in this state of grief and lamentation that just becomes engorged with the experience that we've been among the missing, and that it's overwhelming. And so if you're going to go into open awareness, you're going to face the closed awareness of the past, and it's going to bite you and sting you. Nonetheless, it will free you up through that, and you'll begin to be able to allow yourself to be present on a continuous basis, and that will be the one thing you've ever done for yourself that gives you the best, the most joy and sense of well-being. So actually, it's not about asserting ourselves. It's not about doing our thing. It's actually about listening and tuning in and being open to what shows up. That's a huge topic. I mean, I realize that when I'm saying that, I'm making it sound a little too simple. It's a huge topic, but nonetheless, that's the real thing.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, because I've been working on how I'm going to embrace Trump voters, because my goal is to embrace them with love and to listen.
Yeah.
And
Yes.
I identify those as things I need to learn very quickly, and it's surrender.
Yeah.
Matt Kahn has some incredible lessons on all of this if you want to follow Matt Kahn, Kahn. He's fantastic on this topic. Should-
Yeah.
Can we take a break?
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask. How about if we take 10 minutes, Ellias?
Oh, yeah, we didn't do that.
Yes. And if folks need to go, we're just so grateful you've been here. And, oh, by the way, we should announce that Ellias is available for personal readings. He does phenomenal astrological, but human, divine, how do you want to describe it, Ellias, your readings? You probably should share what you are offering.
I call it Star Genesis. The gist of it is that I perceive each one stripped of all cultural overlays, stripped of my attitudes, stripped of all attitudes, just what reveals itself to me by trained subtle senses. So it's like a pristine experience. It's not a contextual thing of, well, people are like this and this is how they are. It's not that at all. It's about kind of a revolution in soul work, in how we can get to know ourselves from a whole other level. And just in these last 3 months being here in Colorado, this new kind of reading has emerged that I don't quite have the language for yet, but it's in that vein. And this is probably the most right-on description of the overall vibrational field of, let's say, from September to December. So let's say the fall. So for this season, almost the entire fall is in this degree. And it's a very strong one. So the symbol is an old witch on a windy promontory. She is calling to the sea. An old witch on a windy promontory. She is calling to the sea. The greater elements cast us about in their spell of urgency, their gathering squall of the earth herself saying, enough. Those who are chosen to heed the signs, to feel the portents, become swept away by the tide of change and engulfed in the eddies of what always stays the same. Having a convincing, persuasive, first-hand experience of everything raw and direct, huge and stunning. Being right on that edge, where you're the first to catch the wave, to realize what is coming and what it means to us all. Yet not being able to reveal this to others in a form they can fathom. You have to be there to know it this way. The overwhelming surge of collective events becomes a perpetual challenge to meet, to integrate, to metabolize into a form that can be passed on to those drier and more separative. Because the messages, the omens, are heavily laced with warning and cautionary indications, the conviction arises that the news must get through. But the vibration of being a believer makes it very hard for others to enter upon what is being offered in any way that fits their lives, their styles, their minds, their point of view. Nonetheless, this is a solitary vigil of one appointed to go out on that edge and stay there and keep tuning in to the signs and indications. In ordinary life, this becomes a force that pulls way too hard on the heartstrings. In apocalyptic times, it is commonsensical, right on that spot, there when needed. Inside the inside of this frequency, a far subtler resonance is alive. This involves a whispering, an interior tone that is never strident and always sacred and revelatory. When this layer is tapped, all the fireworks disperse, and the only thing remaining is grace of Divine Mother, intervening power, playing through in wondrous ways. Such a tone underlies all the huge edges all the while, and is itself on the far side of the troubles. From that wondrous inward sphere, consolation and peace stream into the cleansed vessels. Whew.
I'm just gonna say a big yes.
Yes.
To that. Big yes.
So this was written, tuned into in 2000 and 2001, 15, 16 years ago. And I've tuned into that degree many times, but if I hadn't lived the autumn, well, I'm still in it, but if I hadn't lived the autumn of 2016, I wouldn't fully understand what that's talking about. That is our lifeline. And today's the turning point. Neptune going direct in that degree. This is the day that we can kind of get it and move on. Get what? Get that we're not inventing this. We're not in a fantasy. Always with Neptune, there's always the question of, is it a fantasy? You know, is it just something you're concocting based on your fears and your wishes and blah, blah, blah? No, it's not a fantasy. Everything that you're experiencing on a vaster scale is happening. Obviously, it's not very easy to, quote unquote, handle that vibration, you know, to work with it, to move with it, as all of us have experienced, you know, long before Trump was elected. Trump's election is only one part of this story here. I would say the main thing that has been so difficult about it, it's that it's an all-engulfing experience. If it were just this one little thing happening on the side or something, it would be like just a tone, or, you know, and it's not like that. It's like this all-permeating feeling of, this is reality check time on planet Earth, and we better get it. A woman that I know who has that degree in her chart, not that she's the only one, but she's worth invoking this way. The way she feels it is that humanity has some kind of rare disease, and it's contagious. And we're going to have to heal this rare disease. And I think the rare disease is that we have lost our souls. And the kind of beings that we are don't do well with lost souls. And yet, my conviction is all the divine worlds will return our souls to us as soon as we ask. As soon as we pray for it, as soon as we really earnestly ask for forgiveness, healing, and reconciliation. Because it's not far away. That's the weird thing about planet Earth. I don't know how it is in other places, but here, nothing is ever far away. Do you know what I mean? It's like, it's just one veil away, or one layer of awareness away.